So good afternoon, so everyone. So first, today we are so happy and honored to have Trunk Bruce to give us talks. And I'm very happy to give this introduction. So Trunks actually is one of the most and best rated actually the cybersecurity expert, and he wrote many actually articles and about actually cybersecurity. And the information, I think the people is different in this classroom and of course beyond the classroom. I couldn't know how many people have been influenced by you. Okay, and if you check his bio, I want to highlight several things. So he has many roles. He is the president of the Brooks Consulting International, but also faculty at the Georgia Tom University. He's technology evangelist, corporate executive, and speaker, writer, government leadership expert, business actually, and an expert on the market executing. So you are really running business and also doing education. So we are so that have very rich experience. So, and he got the MA master degree from the international relationship from the University of Chicago. And he has a lot of experience about his law and everything. I think this is very important because cybersecurity is so close to, right, the law things and the legal things. So I don't want to highlight too much about this one, but you can say today, the Trunk is going to give us very exciting talk, especially because it's the start year of the 2022, and he's going to show his understanding and thought about cybersecurity this year. So let's welcome Achin Trunk.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. I'll give you a short presentation. I'm also going to open it up for questions at the end. One is really the sort of the trends happening in cybersecurity. Second part is really going to go into some of the emerging technologies that are impacting those trends. So it's a pleasure again to be here, and I'll start off with some of the interesting parts. So I always like to start my lectures with this slide because it really epitomizes the situation we're in. And it was done by Joel Brenner, who was a former counsel for NSA. He said, the internet was not built for security, yet we've made it the backbone of virtually all private sector and government operations, as well as communications. Pervasive connectivity has brought dramatic gains in productivity and pleasure, but has created equally dramatic vulnerabilities. Huge heights of personal information are common, and cyber theft, intellectual property, and infrastructure penetrations continue at a frightening pace. And this was several years ago, and it's certainly been exponentially proved. The cyber heist pace has gone higher in 2021 than any year it's been in the past. More breaches, more severity of breaches, more money and data stolen. So we're really, I guess you call it a turning point right now of how we address cybersecurity as we go forward into the next digital era. So what are the global cybersecurity trends? And I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'll give you some of the highlights what I think are really happening right now. First of all, you were seeing that threat actors, especially state-sponsored ones and criminal enterprises, who often cooperate, by the way, are taking advantage of the expanding cyber attack surface by using their resources to employ more sophisticated means of discovering target vulnerabilities, automating their phishing attacks, and finding new deceptive paths for infiltrating malware. Basically, they're using the technologies that are current, and including machine learning and artificial intelligence and surveillance, and they're using them to their advantage to find gaps and exploit those gaps. And the problem now is also that many of these groups, particularly these criminal enterprises, share information on the dark web. They share tools, hacking tools. They share, actually they trade bounties sometimes and do all kinds of different things. So there's a lot of problems with that already, and it makes it a global issue, obviously, because it's every corporation, every government, and every person that's potentially affected by these cyber attack groups. The other thing that I will talk about a little later on in the presentation is the disruptive technologies like mobility, IoT, Internet of Things, and cloud computing are bringing operational shifts that are changing the environment, how we set up our security and how we do our business. So these advances take continuous monitoring, new analytics, and need to have new perceptive and new risk management profiles as we proceed into this new, what I call what is called the fourth digital era, industrial era. So what is the cost of these cybersecurity and cyber threats right now? This is a quick synopsis, but it's true. Security investments now are being driven by persistent threats, policy remedies, workforce shortages, and technological innovation, which the items I just mentioned to you. But now we're experiencing, phishing attacks, still the most common, consistently a top cyber threat because they're easy to do. Anyone can be phished. You don't have to be wrong or dumb to hook on something that you are, click on something that you don't completely recognize. It could be something from your bank, your boss that you think is real, or something that is from a relative, you see the name you see, because it's constantly they use other people to get to you. So a lot of social engineering techniques. So phishing attacks, easy to do, easy to automate. You only need to be once right for the hacker to make it worthwhile, even out of 1,000 attempts. So it's easily a big problem that is not going away. There's a lot of training and other things being done, but it's still very difficult to the sophistication of some of these attacks and the way they can mimic the graphics on things make it almost impossible sometimes to know that you're being phished. Ransomware is now considered the fastest growing cybercrime. Now, ransomware has been around a long time, almost 3 decades, and it's been deployed, over that time. But last year, it's been deployed more than ever before, and there's several reasons for this. One is that, and the primary reason is that because of cryptocurrencies, criminals are able to get money. The first primary reason for most hackers is financial. They want to gain financial. I mean, there's other reasons too, geopolitical reasons, to steal stuff, secrets, etc., to cause havoc. But getting money is their primary goal. And they get this money now. They can get it in prepaid cards and cyber currencies, cryptocurrencies that they can easily cash in on. And it's more difficult for authorities, particularly global authorities, to actually confront them and prosecute them. So that's why ransomware is so popular. And the other thing is it just works. And there's some pretty ingenious new malware that's been invented recently off of some of the old patterns of malware for ransomware that are quite effective. It's estimated right now there's actually 430 million types of malware online. I think that's conservative. It's probably closer to twice that. And another conservative estimate, and this came from a University of Maryland research a couple of years ago, that a cyber attack happens every 39 seconds. I'm told now that it's actually every 11 seconds. And what is true is that cybersecurity will cost the world $6 trillion annually by the beginning of this year, which is more than a lot of countries' gross national product. And that we're also facing a big threat with advanced persistent threats, like Trojan, malware that can be placed where an attacker gains control of computer systems, creating backdoors, obtaining access to confidential and sensitive data. And if you remember the recent hack of SolarWinds, this is a good evidence of it. They were there over a year before anyone noticed, creating backdoors and opportunity to steal stuff and plant things. So that is one of the bigger threats right now looked at, particularly for critical infrastructure. And the other thing that's happening is, and it's always going to happen, is insider threats. It could be either negligence, someone leaves something unguarded or something on where a password's stolen or administrator option taken over, or they do it deliberately because they have a grievance with the company or agency they're working for. So as I mentioned, ransomware, according to the newest World Economic Forum report that just came out this week, 80% of cyber leaders now consider ransomware a danger and a threat to public safety. They note that cybercrime, ransomware attacks rose 151% last year, and they're an average of 270 cyber attacks per organizations in 2021, and a 31% increase from 2020, which was a very big year for breaches. And each successful breach now is costing average of $3.6 million to a company. And then the other aspect of that is after a breach becomes public, the average share price of the hacked company underperforms in the NASDAQ by less. You may be hacked and lose something or your data or your money at the time. It's the implications to a company or an agency months afterwards and their reputation. So this is a pretty cool graph that also just came out recently by Checkpoint. And it looks at the average weekly attacks per organization by industry. And you see that, we're talking right now about Purdue University. Education research is really one of the top targets. And the reason that is because, first of all, there's a lot of networks, various networks departments. There's a lot of students and visitors that have access to things, and it's very difficult to protect. So there's a big effort now being put in. A lot of universities have been hit with ransomware and extortion claims over the last year. And then government, military are always going to be a target, usually by state-sponsored hackers. Communications, healthcare has been in the news a lot in the recent years since COVID-19, because most hospitals just didn't have big, strong security systems or even plans, and hackers use COVID-19 as an excuse to get in and extort them. A lot of ransomware, because they need to operate, they can't go down, and that's why it's been considered a national security crisis with healthcare. And you can look at this other slide. I'll leave this slide deck behind for everybody, but pretty much if you look at it, every industry is being hit, and a lot of them successfully. So that's something we need to change. So what are the cyber threat realities? Well, this is just a quick chart of who's who. First you have the nation states. Their motives are economic or military. They usually target IP or infrastructure. You see that a lot with utility plants. You've seen it recently with the Russian hack on Ukraine, including their power plants, which happened several years before that too. You see organized crime and financial gain, and you see them attacking IP, banks, point of sale systems. Huge amount of money going through there, and of course that's one of the big motivators of the non-state actors. Terrorist extremists, they do that because they want to be visible and get attention. Hackers and hacktivists, they've always been out there, and they just have fun hacking things. That happened with Twitter. Hacking happened with a lot of different leaders. The former head of the CIA's account was hacked, personal account. And then again, trusted insiders, either revenge, financial gain, and they're after your data or network information. It happens a lot in life sciences, in other areas where the IP can be quite valuable. So one area that's really sort of come into its own is IoT, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, because every connected device is a potential entry point for hackers, and particularly for critical infrastructure that is more of a target, a high-profile target. So the Internet of Things devices face 5,200 attacks a month. Well, and every 36 mobile devices has high-risk apps installed on, according to Symantec. From an internet threat report a couple of years ago. And attackers often, they turn their IoT devices into a bot and infect other connected devices. So we have an issue here. And this slide, which I developed, is what I consider the IoT attack surface vulnerability slide, which covers some of the key things that you might want to remember when you're dealing with IoT, is that there's about 50 billion wirelessly connected networks of sensors to the internet right now. According to Cisco, there's others who say there's a lot more. By 2023, there will be 3 times more network devices on Earth than humans. And by 2025, an average connected person anywhere in the world will interact with connected devices nearly 4,800 times a day. That's basically one interaction every 18 seconds. So security incidents involving IoT devices have impacted 67% of enterprises already. And that's been according to Forrester, which is a very reputable research group. And then 50% of IoT devices on corporate network security organizations, they don't maintain the basic security measures beyond default passwords. So one of the things that the companies usually don't do is that when they buy something, they leave the same password on the device. And of course, that's easy to hack. 98% of all IoT device traffic is also encrypted, exposing personal confidential data on the network. So people often ask, what is the biggest vulnerability? And I usually say IoT and supply chains. And it's just for this slide highlights the reason why. So probably the thing that we fear most and the government fears most, and it's really been a series of memorandums through OPM and the White House recently, is critical infrastructure security. We saw recently with the Colonial Pipeline what happened when there was a hack and the whole East Coast supply line for oil was taken down, which affected food prices, trucks, delivering things, etc. So it shows the vulnerability of it. And this is because of a trend. called IT/OT convergence. IT, information technology. OT is operational technology. IoT technology is also part of it. And operational technology vulnerabilities are increasing year over year, largely because they're based mostly on legacy systems. And so they pose unique challenges. And in OT, when I'm thinking about OT, I'm looking at talking about really more about SCADA. You're looking at utilities. You're looking at plants. You're looking at anything really large that involves engines or requires anything to manufacture something. So the big problem with this is that there's a lack of skilled workforce in those areas in OT. There's just not enough of them trained. And perhaps the biggest risk is that what may work in cybersecurity IT may pose a risk in OT. Again, the Colonial pipeline is a good example of that, because you just can't turn off the pipeline when you may have something corrupted in your IT side, but then if you took it off your OT side, you're putting everything down. So patching is not an option every time there's an update or disruption. You can't take it down, because it could take days to bring it back up. And also the impacts of a breach could be calamitous operationally and economically. That's also true with IT, though. And then other problems with IT is that most organizations don't even know if attack has occurred, or lack the systems to monitor and detect the breaches in these control systems. I mentioned that they're different systems, and they're not new for the most of them. In fact, most of our grid was built in the 1970s and 1980s. So, when you try and patch on and bolt on things, you still have a lot of vulnerabilities. In the case of energy systems infrastructure, again, I mentioned that most of them are 25 years old, no security built in, early stages for digital transformation, where the vulnerabilities are right now. And so hackers, they seek out these unsecured ports and systems on industrial systems and connected to the internet. And as I mentioned, IT supply chains that are connected to those are particularly vulnerable. They'll find the easiest way in. So the cyber risks, gaps, and this is for both IT and OT, are these legacy systems. You have a lot of databases that are legacy too, that are not well protected. Siloed organizations that don't really coordinate, cooperate with each other. Reliance on bolted on point products. Lack of contextual awareness of the threats and solutions is still a huge problem with most companies. They just don't have the C-suite cyber expertise, and it's a policy issue. They don't know the compliance requirements, which is a legal issue. And there's also qualified worker shortage. And again, cybersecurity is not just an engineering or an IT role. It really is a role for policy. It's a role for legislation. It's a role for law. And it's a role for anyone to market these products, which is a huge industry right now, and to evangelize these products and solutions, because it's not going away. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. So one thing, though, that is essential, and this is not me making this up, this is NIST, is really having a strong security framework. And really, this is just risk management, and that's really a requirement, I think, for any industry you're in, but particularly for anything dealing with security. So the risk management for the NIST put out is identify, assess, and respond to threats, and protect, detect, respond, recover. So those things are really essential if you're going to approach something. You have to know where your gaps are, what your assets you have, what you want to protect, and if you are breached or hacked, how to respond to it. Do you have an incident response plan, et cetera? So this is the first starting point. And NIST is a public organization, part of the Department of Commerce and DHS, and all these is free. They do it for every vertical in the industry, so you can go and get a how-to with these framework summaries. And so my own thoughts on how we conquer the cybersecurity threats out there as we get more and more connected and more vulnerable and more sophisticated types of attacks is what we need to really do, what I call the 3 pillars. And one is that everything we build now, we need to do by security by design, which is you build agile systems with operational cyber fusion to be able to monitor, recognize, respond to emerging threats. You need to install intrusion systems, monitor malicious activity on your networks, et cetera. All this is really critical, and it's difficult to do after you've already built it. Defense in depth, which has really been the primary, mantra for most companies and for government over the past few years, has been, you need to look at everything: your technologies, your processes, your air gapping, your hardening of your hardware, software, your encryption capabilities of the data, and your sensors and flow of everything. It's difficult because it's expensive and most companies just don't have the resources or understanding how to orchestrate that. And then what is really now the more of the popular security model, which has really taken roots in the last year, particularly with the federal agencies, DoD, Intelligence Committee, and DHS, is a concept called zero trust. And it's really a security model that uses strict identity verification for every person or entity, and it could be a device, attempting to access network resources, regardless of whether the person or entity is in the office or outside of it, bound by a network perimeter, or accessing the network remotely. Basically, you just don't trust it. You have to verify it first that they should be there, and that, you know, if they're not, then they can't be part of it. So that's integral, I think, to everything. So these security strategies are continuing to evolve. You have to strive for a multi-layered approach. There's no one thing that you know, is a panacea for everything. So again, you bake in the security design process from the beginning, and then you have to look at, you know, some of the tools, and I'll get a little bit of those. I mean, you have to have multi-factor authentication nowadays, because it's just too easy to duplicate a password or get in for a very simple way. You need to have a layered and risk-based access, you know, who gets what privilege and why. Behavioral biometrics, you have to look at people who are using it, what their particular insider threat, what they're doing. And now when we get AI, which we'll go into a little bit, is you have to look at the anomaly detection. You know, is there something wrong in the network that's showing up? So emerging technologies that automate cybersecurity detection, response, including machine learning, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, are really coming into vogue. So with risk, you have to look at cyber breach as not a static threat, and they're always changing. So again, I mentioned the cybersecurity risk management steps. So one of the things you really want to do if you're starting a risk management plan is you identify and classify the assets, prepare vulnerability assessments, confirm the security protocols of all the parties in your data chain, do vulnerability assessments with penetration tests, really important, and test incident response plans and create a cyber resilience plan. If you just did these 6 things, you're going to be more secure as a company or as an entity or as an individual, depending on what you're doing in your career and whether you'll be a target. But I assume, you know, everyone's a target if they're using a credit card. So, and particularly online. So this is just really how to approach risk. And that's a good slide to keep in mind. So the nuts and bolts of this risk management strategy, you know, the vulnerability assessments, they need to be instilled up front in the process, where you map the control systems, communication flows, all the connected devices in your network. You need to know where they are. You have to modernize your security architecture. You have to have a policy for mobile and BYOD, the security, bring your own device security, have incident response. You need to have policy, which are the best practices and compliance for your industry, or in some cases they're required. What you need to do if you're in let's say the nuclear industry, you have to follow NERC standards. Then of course you have to protect your critical infrastructure through the rapid prototyping of technologies, and done through public-private cooperation, because most of the critical infrastructure in the United States particularly is owned by the private sector and operated, or oversaw, not really operated, but overseen by the governments, and state and local and federal governments. So it's not an easy endeavor. So this is just a summary page. If you're interested in cybersecurity, it's another slide to keep. It really is a quick overview of all of the requirements you need to look at if you're going to be cyber secure. And you know, I won't go through them all, but you can look at them right now. They're really, and it's not all inclusive. There are others too, but these are the basics. And cybersecurity hygiene is the most basic. Is really cybersecurity awareness and passwords, and know what not to hack on, and to know where everything is. So a lot of this is just really common sense, but it really is something that most people don't follow or know. And so now I'm going to get the second part of this, and this it's shorter, but I think it's more exciting, is that, you know, all this stuff we're doing with cybersecurity is really being impacted in our new fourth industrial revolution. You know, we're dealing with a whole realm of different types of emerging technologies. These include automation and adaptive networks, artificial intelligence, human-computer interface, which is really a fascinating area. Elon Musk is actually doing some stuff in that area with neural links, and also, you know, they now have ability now for people who are paralyzed and can't speak to actually communicate through thoughts. So there's fantastic stuff happening. And then there's machine learning, which is really what most people, it's a part of their artificial intelligence, most people are using right now. with algorithms, cryptography and encryption. We're talking about quantum resistant polymorphic encryptions now, which are cutting edge. Blockchain, which is a relatively new type of approach technology with ledgers. Also a way to help secure things. It has limited ability and scalability, but it's combined with other aspects, it's really important. You're seeing a lot of simulation, virtualization, gaming. This is also used for training. We're all moving to the edge. Cloud computing, edge computing, our devices, us. Biometrics and authentication technology. It used to be just basic, passwords or maybe even eye scan, but now it's your facial recognition, or it could be even your heartbeat. All kinds of interesting technologies and hardware separation, hardening, photonics and sensors, using photonics to transmit data, big data, where real-time analytics and predictive analytics capabilities through artificial intelligence, and how they're storing the data now with magnetic tapes and even on DNA. And of course, the big stuff, the supercomputing, which are continual race among many universities and countries to build the strongest supercomputers, and then quantum computing, which is on the horizon, not quite there yet, but will revolutionize the way we do computing, making it millions and millions of times faster. So of these, the one that I think are most practical for cybersecurity at the moment are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cybersecurity, and how they're used, threat detection. You could detect spams and phishing through them, through anomalies, malware identification. They match programs you draw on that matches the malware that's out there. They autonomously can patch something if it needs to be patched and there's vulnerabilities discovered or 0-day. They can categorize what types of attacks there is in cyber. They can more adapt to evolving risk, continually update. And they're good for both offensive and defensive cyber. We could attack with its AI as well as defend with AI. And that's interesting because cyber attackers are already using offensive artificial intelligence to test, to sort of self-mutate as it learns from the environment and hide in the background and leverage existing data flows and human behavior to remain undetectable and then eventually attack. So, it's a two-edged sword. Cloud computing and cybersecurity. Cloud computing consists of moving and storing data and applications over the internet and remote servers. So it's not necessarily in a cloud, but it's in another device. Generally, it offers users cost flexibility, mobility, and increased productivity. For cybersecurity, it allows for good firewalling and managed security. And advantage of cloud is, where the data resides and who's managing it. The problem also is with the cloud, sometimes it depends who manages your data, who it's commingled with, and whether the data, your legacy data, is actually compliant or fits in. And again, if you're putting everything in one place, even though it might be more protected, it could be also at greater risk, because if everything is stolen at once, your data is part of it. Internet of Things, as I highlighted a little bit earlier, IDC, another great research firm, predicts that spending in IoT will reach nearly 1.4 trillion from last year. This coincides with the companies continuing to invest in IoT hardware, software services, and connectivity. I mentioned earlier, Cisco 50 billion devices now connected, and perhaps more even interested in just the devices themselves or the sensors. Dr. Janusz Brajcek, Vice President of MEMS and Sensing Solutions at Fairchild Semiconductor, he predicted there will be 45 trillion network sensors 20 years from now, and they'll be driven by smart systems, including IoT, mobile, wearable, market growth, digital health, context computing, and artificial intelligence. So we're really moving into a sensor-driven world. And these sensors also could be inside of us as chips and implants, which is actually being tested and happened in some other countries, in Finland, I think in Sweden too, that people are actually putting chips inside their arms to be able to access computers and do some of the basic things. So I'm not so sure I'd want a chip inside me, but that's where a lot of the stuff is going. It's eventually be going to what is called the augmented human. And I read about this in some of my Forbes articles, is that you'll be able to, upgrade intelligence, experiences, download information directly into your brain, which is a pretty scary thought. So blockchain, another one I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really a immutable digital ledger, distributed fashion. You don't have a central repository, and it's usually done without a central authority. So it's a basic level. It's a community of users to record, transact in the ledger that's public, that can't be changed. So they're good for security because they keep a record. They're really particularly good for documents deeds, wills, real estate, etc. But there's some attempts to actually make them more scalable. So that's a quick overview. Feel free to follow me, reach out to me at Georgetown, or just on LinkedIn or Twitter. I have about 77,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I post regularly and try to communicate with many of them I can. But thank you for having me here, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And I'd like to open this up to Q&A. I'll stop the share, and got a couple questions. Could you explain more what cybersecurity industries do? Is all the work done by writing codes, identify, recover? I'll answer that. The answer is no, and I sort of touched on that a little bit. Cybersecurity is element of his coders. Those are the people that do a lot of the programming, and it's good to have understanding and background on that. But it's not just the coders; it's pretty much everyone that is involved in cybersecurity, from the management, from the people that do your marketing and sales, from the people that protect all your security, your CISOs, your CIOs. It's involved with your lawyers who need to understand the implications and liabilities. So cybersecurity is really just like everything else. It's a tool and technology with thousands of different types of aspects to it. There's different endpoints. There's networks. There's OT, IT, as I mentioned. So it's really an area that people often look at it. It's just an IT thing, but it really isn't. It's way beyond that. So I encourage everyone to learn more about it because it really encompasses everything, and also affects every individual and company out there. Second question here is, what are your thoughts on impacts to the cyber ecosystem and things such as Log4j and the secondary and tertiary effects? Great question. This is from Medina Williams. I think that's really a wake-up call. That was a 0 day that we just found that has implications, because you could connect to anything as a hacker. There's a serious effort to I think it's on Apache, but I think it's a serious effort to try and remedy that. So most of the organizations I know are patched it up. But if you look at history and you look at a few years ago, there was a similar thing with Mirai, which is a malware that spread out through 120 countries, and a lot of hospitals and education stuff that were operating on Windows 7. And so everything we discover is a vulnerability you can use by hackers. And if you're not there quick enough, it could cause a serious damage. And the other thing is that, again, this is really more from lessons of SolarWinds, is we just don't know. Most companies don't know if there's someone inside there looking what they're doing right now, particularly with threat actors, nation states, with all the capabilities they bring to the table, and be able to do stuff and hide. It's really an imperative to sort of follow what's going on, what the new threats are every day, and you hear about them. And there are people who do nothing and do bounty hunting to find these 0 days, and then there's organizations that share this regularly. So you could be to know, particularly if you're in a position where you're a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, you need to know what the threats are, what the current tactics are and trends, to be able to defend against them. And also nowadays, more than ever, there's a lot more cooperation between the government and private sector to help work together to thwart these threats. Great. Let me see. There's another question here. Okay. How can we learn? How can we learn about cybersecurity? Will you suggest any online courses? How is the career path? I do teach at Georgetown, and it's a graduate course, and it's in cybersecurity risk management. Depends what you want to do. The people in my course tend to be people that have been working for a few years. A lot of them are in government already, so they're trying to improve their career path. But there's a lot of ways to get into cybersecurity, and first is at the undergraduate level at colleges. There's a lot of courses that can be made available and take, just from the basic coding. But every university has them, and a lot of them have certificate programs. Also, you can go to CompTIA, which has these courses online, certificate courses. If you really want to get some of the technical stuff, you go to a thing called SANS. And the other thing is just go onto LinkedIn and look at some of these groups, information security, cybersecurity groups, and join them, Homeland Security groups. You'll see posts every day. You'll also see who's posting them and some of the people, maybe people that might hire you. Most companies are looking because there's huge shortage, a dearth of cybersecurity practitioners. So if you get the right qualifications and find that path that you want to take, there's a lot of opportunity out there for you. Okay, what are you seeing in regards to trends in cyber insurance? This is from Chuck Sackley. Lloyd's of London moved to limit nation state attack coverage. The cyber insurance is a good thing, I think, but they're just not, it's too early to sort of quantify things. And I know it was adapted by a lot of banks early on, but they're finding that a lot of the stuff is, it has to be comprehensive in terms of your plan. And it's the nitty gritty that you may not have that makes you liable. So it's really an evolving area. And it's a question of whether enough companies will actually go in the pool to make it worthwhile for the insurance companies, and whether the insurance companies will be forthcoming and insure enough for the right, smaller and medium-sized businesses too that need it most. So I think the jury's out on it. I'm a proponent of it, but I think it needs a lot of evolving. How do you think the hybrid work culture fueled by the pandemic will shape the threat landscape? Well, this is from Akash Ravi, and the answer is it already has. I mean, we've actually gone to a hybrid workforce, not by our choice, but because of COVID-19. Instead of having one office to protect, all of a sudden CISOs and CIOs found out they had to protect thousands of offices, employees, depending how big the business was. And this takes away the purview of a lot of the people protecting it, the firewalls, et cetera. So I think it's required a lot of new tools that are being enacted. It also requires a lot of more cyber awareness by employees, which is also another thing that's important to do. And so I think it's going to continue to be this way. We're going to be in a hybrid world, I think, for a while. You need to have strong firewalls. You need to be aware of your routers are strong too, that your information data is encrypted. All this is really important. So there's a lot of steps you can take, and I think a lot of companies are quickly adapting to it. So I'm pretty optimistic that the pandemic may have been actually a wake-up call to have us better security in remote workplaces and at home. So this is from Murat Zamir. Do you think platforms such as Try Hack Me and Hack the Box would help to guide us throughout our career and until getting a job or internship? Yeah, sure. I think the more you try and get involved and learn from people, the better it is, the more you can do. There are a lot of internships available out there too. So I think, look at government, look at state and local government too, as well as companies. And anytime you're involved in one of these things, you're going to meet people. It used to be really, if I look at my career back, it's really networking that gets you where you're going. And most things, you never know who you're going to meet. It's going to introduce you to your next job or your career opportunity. And so absolutely get involved. How do you think, this is from Anonymous, the Hack the Box is in terms of learning about cybersecurity? I think it's good. I mean, I think, again, cybersecurity is a learning curve. There's so much to it. And if you just get involved in a little way, you'll want to learn more. And there's so many different elements out there that you can learn, from in cybersecurity, because it's so broad and there's so many elements to it. So everything you do is good. From your perspective, how far are you seeing deep learning frameworks being used in cybersecurity versus ML AI? Do you think this can help close the gaps? This is from Fred Martinez. I think we're starting to see it. I think we're primarily relying on machine intelligence right now, but I'm pretty optimistic on the pace of technology, how much it's changing and the capabilities over the last 2 years. There seems to be so much more research and investment going into it, and a lot more competition among the private sector too, in these companies being seeing what's being invested in M&A. So I think we're pretty close to that. And again, deep learning frameworks are good. Behavioral is really key. It's the most difficult thing to anticipate and defend in cybersecurity. So I think we're going to see some major breakthroughs in the next couple of years. Now, again, I think we're on the cusp of a lot of interesting technologies that, and this question is not necessarily having a technology, it's understanding how to use them and orchestrate them, which is really going to be the challenge. See if there are any more questions. Okay.
Yeah. Trunk, I think you mentioned, I feel your slides had a lot of information, and you mentioned that we can have your slides. So
Yes.
yeah, so maybe I will contact you offline, and we'll ask you maybe send the link to your presentation, then I can post one to the.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I think, usually when I speak, I like to use slides for cybersecurity just because there's so many different aspects and statistics that are sort of wake-up calls for people, and then go back to them and use them. It makes a lot of sense. Rather than, it's not death by PowerPoint, but it's really share some interesting facts that you can use later on.
Chuck, thank you very much for the presentation. And next week we will post both the video and since we have your permission now, your slides next to it. And we will be promoting it on our social media and have it available for viewing on our website. So please feel free to share with others to come back and see your very, very interesting talk today.
Great. And I appreciate you having me. And
Trunk, there's one more question.
Sure.
Just comes out last minute. Would you want to take a look?
Oh, okay. Another question. Okay.
Sorry, but we
okay. Do bug bounties?
Yeah, Murata pose us.
I don't do bug bounties, but I have a lot of friends that do. People actually do that as a career. They make money on it. So, that's a different part of another part of cybersecurity. I mean, there's really different, like I said, there's a lot of different elements to it. But that's, yeah, I encourage people to do that though, because you find a lot of the malware that way.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why. I think Michael disabled my video. That's why I cannot show my face to you. But as Joey said, we are so yeah. Oh, yeah. Awesome. They can allow me to start my video now. I can say.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. We want to appreciate actually you coming here to give so exciting a talk to actually the young students and answer these questions. They help them a lot. And yeah, as Joey said, we are going to post your video and also as well as your presentation slides and to the more people. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And I'll help circulate the social media once you post it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you for everyone to come in for today. And hope everybody is safe. And we'll see you next week.